Hi, everyone. Thank you for being so patient as we work to fill the room. It's wonderful that we have so many people interested in coming to the event. I'm Pheroze Unwalla. I'm an associate professor and chair of the Middle East Studies program here. We'd like to acknowledge, I'm sorry, I got multiple mics to manage. We'd like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. This has clearly become a trite, performative statement for many at UBC, but there's a need to state it and, in the present moment, draw vital connections with our work. We live and work on territory that was colonized, indigenous land that was stolen via acts of settler colonial genocide that sought not only physical extermination and forced relocation of indigenous populations, but the destruction of their cultures and histories, their education systems and food and health infrastructure, their community and social fabric. We acknowledge this past and present to prompt recognition of indigenous histories and rights here and now, but also to remind us of our obligation to actively fight against settler colonialism and genocide here and everywhere. This event is organized by UBC Faculty for Palestine, F4P, a diverse interdisciplinary group of faculty from across the university. UBC F4P is a member of the National F4P Network, which includes over 600 faculty of all ranks from over 40 universities and 15 colleges from across the country, and it is growing. Before we begin, I'd like to outline some guidelines for the evening. Number one, UBC F4P affirms the academic freedom of all UBC faculty, staff, and students to, in the words of UBC's own academic freedom policy, quote, express ideas through respectful discourse and the pursuit of open discussion without the risk of censure. All members of the university must recognize this fundamental principle and must share responsibility for supporting, safeguarding, and preserving this central freedom. Behavior that obstructs free and full discussion vitally threatens the integrity of the university's forum. Such behavior cannot be tolerated. We must abide by and protect this freedom, even as, or especially because, others at the university and beyond are working to undermine it. Two, F4P stands against all forms of bigotry and racism, including but not limited to anti-Palestinian racism, anti-Arab racism, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia. Three, anyone engaging in disruptive behavior will be asked to leave the room in order to allow other attendees to benefit from this educational program. Four, please note that we are live streaming this event for the overflow room, and there's a recording of it as well. This is to document the event and its proceedings. Please note that although a recording will be produced, we are committed to ensuring the audience's safety throughout the event, including the Q&A. We kindly ask you to not use your phones or any other recording devices to photograph or record the proceedings to ensure everyone's safety and privacy. We will ask you to leave if you do try to record the event. Finally, we've been made aware that some persons may come to this event to disrupt it. I would note first the irony of anyone trying to obstruct and halt an event called Palestine Prohibited. Attacking an academic event that is itself discussing attacks on academic freedom does not seem like a great approach to my mind. But I want to say something more to anyone here who has come with the intention to disrupting this event. To faculty and staff who may disagree with anything we say, let me say this. You are our colleagues, and we will defend your rights as vociferously as we defend our own, and even as we might vehemently disagree with you. And to students who may have come to disrupt the event, I want to say that whether we've taught you or not, you are our students and we are your faculty, and we work to protect your rights too. And we are a community, even though we disagree with one another, and even though it seems quite riven at the present moment. And academic freedom, to me, is not simply about one individual's right to speak openly on a subject, It exists also to enable free and productive debate and discussion between individuals at the university. It's then more than a mere right to be preserved. We have responsibilities towards this space and towards each other that adhere to and at the same time transcend the administration's respectful workplace policy and many other codes of conduct. I then urge all of you, implore all of you, to respect this space and our responsibilities. You may not like what we have to say, but respect our right to say it. Take the time to listen and reflect. Be respectful towards the speakers and towards each other. And use the Q&A to ask your difficult questions or make your points or feelings known. And if the Q&A does not feel like the right space for you at this time to raise your concerns, come speak with us after the event or at some other point in time. That's what we are here for. That all said, thanks for joining us today. We as UBC faculty, students, and staff have assembled to bring urgent attention to the disturbing censorship, silencing, and intimidation efforts that we've observed on our campus in the last 3.5 months. But we're also here to build solidarity and demand accountability from our university. It's important to note that we at UBC are not alone. This is one of many Faculty for Palestine town halls that has taken place across the country in the past 2 weeks, and amidst countless other educational events and protests in the last 3 months, in which hundreds of thousands across the world have participated. It's an indication that while many governments, university administrations, corporations, and lobby groups are stepping up their attempts to silence criticism of the Israeli state and its actions in Palestine, a growing number of people across Canada and the world are standing up together and against apartheid and an ongoing genocide that has killed over 25,000 Palestinians, including an obscene number of children. And of course, the Israeli attacks on Gaza continue unabated. In addition to the death and maiming tolls, these attacks have destroyed or severely damaged all of Gaza's hospitals, all its universities, and over 280 schools. Almost 200 sites of historical and cultural importance have been destroyed or damaged in Israeli air raids. Attacks have targeted bakeries and food production, aid workers and journalists, and innumerable other persons in vital sectors. And due to the IDF's assault on water, sanitation, and health infrastructure, as well as its prevention and attacks on aid convoys, the WHO has stated that Gaza is facing, quote, catastrophic levels of food insecurity, and rates of preventable infectious diseases are skyrocketing, particularly among children. And this is so much so that deaths in Gaza from disease and famine are projected by some to eventually far outstrip those from Israeli bombs and weapons. It's then more important than ever to speak out and educate people on the genocide and other crimes. We do this primarily in the hopes of helping to stop the killing and save as many people as possible. But events like today are also about preserving the university as a space for critical discourse and speaking truth to power. By coming together in the face of incessant attacks and intimidation, as well as more oblique forms of administrative complicity, we let everyone know that we will not stop exercising our rights to speak out on Palestine, and we will not be cowed in educating our community and other publics on genocide and other criminal acts, no matter where they are taking place and who is committing them. Before we begin the town hall, I'd like to invite Professor Dina Al-Kassim, Associate Professor in the Department of English Languages and Literatures, up for a poetry recitation.
We thought to begin with the poem you've all heard, I think, and read by Refaat Alareer, an English professor and author, recently deceased. If I must die, you must live to tell my story, to sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth and some strings. Make it white with a long tail, so that a child somewhere in Gaza, while looking heaven in the eye, awaiting his dad who left in a blaze, and bid no one farewell, not even to his flesh, not even to himself, seize the kite, my kite, that that you made, flying up above, and thinks for a moment an angel is there bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope. Let it be a story. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now to our program. Dr. Srinivas Murthy was scheduled to speak, but unfortunately could not make it today. Dr. Murthy is a clinical associate professor in the Faculty of Medicine at UBC, a critical care and infectious diseases physician at BC Children's Hospital, and a member of the Health Workers Alliance for Palestine. He was going to speak on the attacks on hospitals and healthcare professionals, as well as attacks on academic freedom at UBC Medical School. He sends his support and looks forward to participating in future events. But we have 3 distinguished speakers from UBC who will speak to you on the situation here and what we might do going forward. They'll each speak for approximately 15 minutes, after which time we'll have a Q&A. First up, I'd like to invite Dr. Brenna Bhandar up to the podium.
Okay, good evening, everyone. It's fantastic to see such a great turnout for this town hall. And I'm going to spend about sort of 10 to 15 minutes talking about lawfare and academic freedom, 2 things which are interrelated. Okay, so lawfare, or war waged through legal means, has always been central to colonization. The use of legal doctrines, such as doctrine of discovery, doctrine of conquest, the idea of terra nullius, which may be familiar to some of you, lay at the foundation of the European colonization of the Americas and beyond. The use of property laws, contract law, criminal law, constitutional law have all been deployed as tools of dispossession throughout the colonial world. This is lawfare, the use of courts, legal actions, and also the threat of legal action to wage war on people in a way that appears legitimate and appears non-violent. Lawfare in our contemporary moment remains a key means of dispossessing Indigenous peoples here in British Columbia and in Canada, as well as in Palestine. And while the histories of colonial settlement in these 2 places are, of course, very different, they also share many similarities, and lawfare is one of those similarities. So lawfare, in the first instance, is a primary strategy used in the colonization of Indigenous and Native peoples. And in our current moment, this term lawfare has also been used to describe the efforts to quash and criminalize political dissent, academic freedom, and particularly and specifically, as we are focusing on tonight, speech related to Palestine. Attacking pro-Palestine political activity through legal means is also called lawfare. Now, it is really interesting that this term, once used critically by colonized peoples to describe such attacks, is now being used explicitly by organizations who seek to bring legal actions against people engaging in the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement and other peaceful political movements that support Palestinian liberation. So we can see on the slide the Lawfare Project, which is an organization, as its name now says very blatantly, committed to lawfare. As I will show you, one of its main targets is pro-Palestine activism on college and university campuses, and specifically the targeting of BDS. So another thing I want to mention that I saw as I was going through these various lawfare organizations is also the misappropriation of the language of civil rights and the misappropriation, I would say, of the language of anti-racism, equity, etc. Now we can see on this screen capture from one of the pages on the Lawfare Project, and I encourage you to go to these websites yourself to explore and to understand what lawfare currently looks like on university campuses. So the Lawfare Project, as you can see, provides guidance and legal assistance to students, etc., etc. And what I want to point out on this particular page is the term anti-Israel conduct. Okay, so these are not just organizations who are trying to defend Jewish students against anti-Semitism, which is of course necessary and legitimate, but these organizations, the Lawfare Project, have an explicit agenda of targeting what they call anti-Israel harassment and also BDS. And we see occurring over and over and over on the web pages and the legal actions taken by these organizations, the specific targeting of BDS. Another lawfare organization, the UK Lawyers for Israel, we can see, as I mentioned a moment ago, the appropriation of anti-racism and anti-racist language. One of the slides, promoting racial harmony, tackling anti-Semitism with legal support and advice. And of course, an organization that is dedicated to countering anti-Semitism would not be problematic, but that's not what these organizations are geared towards. On the same page as the UK Lawyers for Israel, we also have many resources dedicating to promoting a Zionist narrative of establishing the Israeli state. And if you go through the web pages, you can see that this, again, is not a scholarly resource aimed at discussing 48, etc., but pretty blatant propaganda. They have legal briefing notes on things like genocide. Again, I encourage you, they don't look so bright on the slide, but I encourage you to have a look so that you can see. And this is an organization with lawyers bringing legal action. So one of the legal actions that they brought involves a complaint to the Charity Commission, and this is taking place in the UK, of course, against war on want. And for anyone who's familiar with the landscape of anti-poverty activism in the UK, Palestine solidarity work, War on Want is an extremely important organization that has charitable status. And one of the means of using the law to harass and target organizations like War on Want was to bring complaints against War on Want to the Charities Commission, alleging that they were engaging in kinds of political advocacy that are not allowed under the Charities Act legislation. Now, it's interesting that UKFLI actually has also a charitable trust. So they are definitely in breach of what they seem to want to go after when it comes to pro-Palestine organizations. Now, I want to turn to lawfare and suppression of academic freedom. So in Canada and elsewhere, there have been many instances of lawfare unleashed on academics and students who are variously critical of the Israeli state, supportive of or engaged in BDS, and more generally supportive of the Palestinian struggle for self-determination and liberation. And I want to say that in this moment, over the last few months, what we've seen is that the threshold for facing legal harassment is extremely low. We've had lawyers, we've had doctors, and others being sacked or suspended for signing petitions or even for posting pro-Palestine messages on their social media accounts. So the threshold for harassment in this moment is extremely low. You don't have to do much, in other words. The forms that lawfare have taken cover a broad spectrum and include attempting to have academic conferences suspended or stopped merely for focusing on Palestine. The slide has an example of the Israel-Palestine Mapping Models of Statehood and Paths to Peace Conference, which was held at Osgood Law Faculty in 2009. There were very serious attempts to have their shirk funding removed after they had received shirk funding to hold this conference. You can see from the list of speakers, many eminent speakers from all over the place. And what happened with that conference is there was so much furore over it. The university had to employ a retired Supreme Court of Canada Justice, Justice Iacobucci, to do an investigative report of what had happened. And Professor Susan Drummond, who had been one of the conference organizers, published a book, Unthinkable Thoughts, about this whole situation. That's just one example. Where conferences host speakers who, in addition to being Palestinian in many instances, will present viewpoints that are critical of Israeli state practices. We have the use of lawsuits to stymie democratically passed BDS motions in trade unions and in municipalities. And we also have the use of lawsuits to subvert academic freedom and the right to engage in discourse, teaching, and research that are critical of Israel. Finally, I want to mention that these legal actions often are acting in concert with the more general weaponization of anti-Semitism. And unfounded smears of anti-Semitism have repeatedly been used to deny or attempt to deny academics jobs in universities, as we saw most spectacularly with the Azarova affair at U of T, and which many of us have also experienced firsthand at UBC. I have spoken publicly about my own hiring in the law faculty that was mired in conflict because of my support for BDS and for using the settler colonial framework in my research on Palestine. And that is recorded in a Center for Free Expression webinar that was dedicated to looking at this issue of academic freedom and the Palestine exception. Now, I want to turn to academic freedom and how our very ability to openly engage in critical discourse of Israeli state practices in Palestine, to utilize the language of genocide or ethnic cleansing to describe what is happening in Gaza and all over the occupied Palestinian territories, to use the framework of settler colonialism as Palestinian and even some Israeli scholars have been doing for decades, to use the language of apartheid, all of these things which have been circulating in the international sphere for decades amongst NGOs, the UN, and other international bodies, is imperiled here at UBC and across Canadian campuses. So what is academic freedom? This is the definition of academic freedom as it exists within UBC policy. The freedom within the law to pursue what seems to the members of the university community as fruitful avenues of inquiry, to teach and to learn unhindered by external or non-academic constraints, such as donors, and to engage in full and unrestricted consideration of any opinion. This freedom extends not only to the regular members of the university, but to all who are invited to participate in its forum. Suppression of this freedom, whether by institutions of the state, the officers of the university, or the actions of private individuals, would prevent the university from carrying out its primary functions. Moreover, behavior that obstructs free and full discussion, not only of ideas that are safe and accepted. Yeah, yes, I can see the reaction, huh? Yeah, in this moment. Yeah, so much for this definition. Not only of ideas that are safe and accepted, but of those which may be unpopular or even abhorrent, vitally threatens the integrity of the university's forum. Such behavior cannot be tolerated. We can say that to our administrators here, can't we? Okay, so before we get to Diamond and Diamond, I want to just name a few examples of how our academic freedom has been imperiled at UBC. In response to a directive from senior administrators, at least one head of department decided to remove a statement from their departmental website that expressed support for the Palestinian people and may have been critical of the Israeli assault on Gaza, although I need to double check that. The academic freedom of heads of departments has apparently been circumscribed on the grounds that they represent the university, and the university cannot make quote-unquote political statements. In one department, an a priori blanket ban has been placed on featuring any articles in the department's newsletter by faculty handling the topic of Israel-Palestine. Selena Robinson, BC Minister of Post-Secondary Education, has stated on Twitter, X, regarding anti-Semitism on BC campuses, that she has, and I'm quoting from her Twitter feed, met with all presidents several weeks ago to review expectations. This was posted before the December break. And that she speaks almost daily with the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, CIJA, and the Jewish Federation of Greater Vancouver. This would suggest that MLA Selena Robinson may be engaging in explicitly political interference, contra the university's own apparent assertion that it needs to remain non-political. CIJA in particular represents a specific political view. Its website clearly states that CIJA is a Zionist organization and that it is pro-Israel. Okay, on to Diamond and Diamond. So many of you are aware that the law firm Diamond and Diamond, who are a firm of personal injury lawyers, has launched 5 lawsuits against Canadian universities, alleging that these universities have failed in their duties to protect Jewish students from discrimination and anti-Semitism. And the universities include TMU, Queen's, York, McMaster, and UBC. Now, without commenting on each of the allegations made in the statement of claim relating to UBC, it is clear that the timing of this action and the allegations concerning, quote, anti-Israel propaganda, which has made, quote, Jewish students feel unsafe, squarely falls into the type of legal action that intends to silence criticism of Israel. Indeed, the statement of claim explicitly requests, in the section detailing the relief sought, and I've put it on the slide, that the university should take the appropriate steps to denounce and reject anti-Semitic movements on the UBC's campuses, including but not limited to the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. So again, I just want to draw out the commonality in all of these lawfare attempts that really BDS is a major target. Also in the statement of claim, we see the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism being referred to. So these things are very important to bear in mind. Now, the lawsuit also takes a swipe at the way that UBC upholds freedom of expression, which is a right protected by the Charter of Rights and Freedom, and claims that faculty are not being sufficiently punished, that's their language, not mine, for engaging in anti-Semitic rhetoric, which in their view, of course, appears to include supporting BDS. These aspects of the Diamond lawsuit are the reasons why many, including independent Jewish voices, have called it a SLAP suit. And a SLAP suit stands for a strategic lawsuit against public participation, often used historically in this province against environmental groups. The suit, in bringing a claim on behalf of all Jewish students who attended UBC between 1998 and 2021, along with all Jewish students currently enrolled at UBC as a certifiable class, so this is a class action they've launched at all these universities, also claims to speak for all Jews, even though many Jewish faculty and students have publicly and repeatedly stated they do not agree with the claims being made in this lawsuit. For instance, Jewish Faculty Network, IJV, etc., have explicitly stated that for them, BDS is not anti-Semitic, just to use that one example. As our academic freedom is under attack, and particularly as it relates to speech and political action, I want to call our attention back to Palestine as I conclude, and to the number of Palestinian intellectuals and academics who have been killed by the IOF, and also the universities, archives, places of worship, and other places of learning that have been systematically targeted and destroyed by the IOF. I want to call our attention to the decades-long suppression of Palestinian academics and students living in the West Bank and Gaza who have been unable to travel, study, lecture, and conduct research outside of Palestine because the Israeli state has prohibited them and prevented them from doing so. So I'm going to end my comments by quoting Stephen Salaita, who, with a very good article published on his website, which again I encourage all of you to read. So you're a professor, here's what you can do to oppose genocide. Zionist groups have organized hundreds of defamation campaigns against Palestinian students and faculty, often resulting in employment termination and other serious forms of recrimination. These campaigns don't exist in a vacuum. Targeting Palestinians and anti-Zionists is an extension of the genocide, or at least one of its attendant tactics. To go back to what Pheroze started us off with, academic freedom does not exist in a vacuum. It is incumbent upon us to use every means at our disposal to teach Palestine and to speak up for Palestinian liberation. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Our next speaker is Professor Hicham Safieddine.
مساء الخير. Don't be scared, it means good evening in Arabic. They're investigating the word intifada somewhere in North Vancouver because it's a hate crime to put that word on your lawn. Students are the beating heart of university life. They are also the weather vane of social change and political transformation. In class and on campus, students, both undergraduate and graduate, must be afforded the safety and support they are entitled to. This is more so in the case where they are vulnerable because they hold political views or have marginalized identities. And here I would say quite the opposite. They hold progressive views, not abhorrent views. Since October 7, students of all backgrounds and faiths and around the world have been standing up for justice in Palestine. And they are paying a heavy price for it, thanks to the anti-democratic and anti-Palestinian policies and practices of university administrations and of state, this is in the case of the United States, or provincial, in the case of Canada, and federal governments. What we are witnessing at UBC is part of this larger context, and I can't stress this enough because a lot of times when we try to explain this to some of our colleagues or fellow students, it always boils down to some complicated policy that wants to ignore the larger problem that is sweeping across the global north. Now, I won't have time, obviously, to go through a lot of what's going on, but in Europe, there is a crackdown, and we have seen a wave of demonization and clampdown, including the suspension of students. In the United States, the US is notorious for the intimidation and harassment of students in solidarity with Palestine. After October 7, these tactics have ranged from powerful Zionist businessmen bullying university administrations to expel students, to toppling a university president or two, to banning the posting of statements on departments or college websites, sounds familiar, just like here at UBC, to hateful crimes like the tragic Vermont shooting of Palestinian students shown here on your right. Canada is not immune to this crackdown. According to a 106-page report prepared by independent Jewish voices, a chilly climate in Canada has arisen in relation to free speech on Palestine. The study was based on 77 testimonies of faculty, students, activists, and representatives of organizations that were hailing from Ontario, Manitoba, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Nova Scotia, Quebec, and Alberta. Among the academics responding were representatives of 11 disciplines from 21 Canadian universities. Experience of suppression of speech on Palestine included the following according to the report: political intervention into hiring, attempts to prevent access to venues, the attempted cancellation of public events on Palestine, as well as targeting individual students or faculty or doxing. Now, this report was published in October 2022, not 2023. So this is 1 year before October 7. But for the Zionists and their allies, and some members of our top administration, and for Canadian mainstream media, history begins and ends with October 7. Now these same pre-October 7 tactics are being deployed today, except unfortunately on a McCarthyistic scale. There is no shortage today of crackdown on students after October 7. I'm just going to mention a couple of the most outrageous. The first, on your right, is the screening of law students who signed a pro-Palestine letter by the Ontario government. They're screening them to actually filter out their, basically hiring them based on their political views. Another is the audacious call by a non-university body, the Zionist lobby group B'nai B'rith, to expel students. They publicly are calling for the expulsion of students because they're described as terror apologists, quote unquote. Now, whether in Canada or abroad, before or after October 7, prohibiting Palestine takes on different forms and variable force. And I think it's important for all of us to try to conceptualize these because it'll save us a lot of trouble when we're trying to sift through the plethora of challenges we're facing. The first, discursive discipline, the prescription or even investigation of terms like intifada or from the river to the sea. The fascist prime minister of Israel holds a sign showing from the river to the sea, and it's a government that we have an official relationship with, and no investigation is done, but people calling for the liberation and for full equality of people in Palestine are actually investigated for saying that. So discursive discipline is a very powerful way in which today is being used against pro-Palestine speech. The second is securitization. So room bookings, increased campus policing, calls by the administration to securitize campus rather than use other forms of de-escalation, which includes opening up spaces for debates like this one. That's number two. Intimidation or harassment, whether it's in class or whether it's on campus. I personally witnessed a faculty member in this university trailing students as they're walking across campus and taking photos of them and refusing security requests to leave. I've seen stalls about Israel. I would never go there if they're students because they are students and I'm faculty. I should respect that relation of power. But they don't, and they're certainly not being investigated. Some of us are being actually prescribed from speaking. Doxing is another which we're all familiar with. Intentional. I didn't know enough about these terms before, so I have a definition, but I think you're ahead of me on this one. I'm still trying to avoid social media as much as I can. So I won't define it. Delegitimation. Erasure of Palestine and Palestinians. Up until today, most administration will refuse to use the word Palestine. The Canada uses it, the UN uses it, our administration says Israel in Gaza, as if, the rest doesn't matter. Censorship, the current incident I'm going to talk about. Obviously, maybe this wasn't explained, I'm focusing on what's happening with students. So my presentation is on students. Demonization, the fake Hamas stickers we're going to talk about. And political interference and indoctrination. My colleague, Dr. Brenna, has spoken about this, but I'm going to speak a bit more about it. So here are some examples. According to testimony by organizers, on November 17, 2023, the event Black Palestinian Transnational Solidarity had 3 room bookings cancelled by UBC officials. The RCMP also made an appearance, according to the testimony. Organizers had to move from one place to another and constantly fend off disruptors. The cairn incident. The cairn of political causes. The UBC engineering cairn is a standalone cement structure located on Main Mall. There is an established tradition of students painting messages with a political content on its sides in order to raise awareness, which I think is definitely a good thing. As you can see, the cairn was painted on the anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, including the not so political statement, Russia equal terrorist. Now, on November 2nd, 2023, this is during Israel's bloody assault on Gaza, which was well underway. The cairn was painted in solidarity with the Palestinian people. The content including the following statements. Israel is killing children again. This is a fact. UBC is complicit. You can agree or disagree, but it's just stating it's complicit. There was a Palestinian flag, God forbid, and there were red handprints and a list of social media accounts of journalists in Gaza documenting the horrors of the Israeli assault. And as many of you know, dozens of them, if not more, have actually been killed in the last 3.5 months. So what happens when this is done on the cairn? It's tarped, because unlike solidarity with Ukraine, pro-Palestine speech is apparently hateful and must be censored. In the latter case, what happened as well? When two racialized female students removed the tarp, they removed the cover, campus security and the RCMP were called on them. Given the danger posed by those two students, the UBC should have called in the Canadian military. Unfortunately, it's a tragic situation, but it's gotten to the point of being so farcical. So let's move on to the more serious incident, in my view, but they both need to be looked into. I want you to contrast this aggressive behavior of calling in the RCMP on two racialized female students with the response to the far more dangerous incidents of fake stickers tied to Hilal BC. On November 17, fake malicious stickers were posted around UBC campus bearing the logo and name of the Social Justice Center. The stickers said, "I love Hamas." Photos of the malicious stickers were shamelessly shared by a UBC faculty on social media before confirming them. The faculty member later apologized, but after the fake news had already spread on Twitter. The professor's apology came after Hilal revealed, as it says in this, that what they posted, after they have revealed that the sticker were fabricated by one of their contractors. In its online post, Hilal said that the action of the contractor does not reflect the values of Hilal BC. If so, why doesn't Hilal BC disclose the name of the contractor? If so, why doesn't Hilal BC publicly apologize to SJC? This is long overdue. So I'm going to ask the following question. What are the values of Hilal BC? I would like to know. What you see on your right is not the work of a contractor. This is Hilal BC ascribing hate speech to a banner unfurled by students at the Nest. The banner says, "Israel is committing genocide in Gaza." What counts as hate speech? Raising the alarm about a genocidal war or demonizing those who are doing it? As we know, Israel is currently facing accusations of genocidal intent at the International Court of Justice. And for me, the fact that South Africa is raising this is itself the indictment, regardless of the outcome. The whole world actually is becoming now increasingly aware of what these students, our students, were warning about. In another context, I can assure you the brave students who unfurled this banner and sounded the alarm would have been honored for their moral courage and foresight. Instead, they were castigated. So what are the values of Hilal BC? While Israeli soldiers drop thousands of tons of bomb on hospitals jammed with the injured, on schools crowded with refugees, on children huddled together in the dark, while these soldiers strip naked captive Palestinian boys and men, wreak havoc and destroy Palestinian homes and belongings including children's toys, relish on camera, which many of us unfortunately have to see, on a regular basis, the remote detonation of entire neighborhoods or university buildings, desecrate cemeteries and dig up the dead. And for those of you who always just believe the Western media, this has been confirmed by a CNN report, but many of us already know about this. So while this is being done by the Israeli army all the while, what does Hilal BC do more recently? They choose to host an Israeli soldier last week. The soldier was featured earlier by CTV, and they made pro-war statements. Did Hilal consider the impact of the physical presence of a battle-fresh soldier on UBC students who may have lost friends or family members to Israeli shelling, or who may be identified as Palestinian or Arab, or who don visible signs of support for justice in Palestine, or are wearing traditional dress that may be interpreted as such? Did they take these into account? If Hilal's values are pro-peace, why not host a former soldier who is a conscientious objector? I think it's because their testimony, if this conscientious objector would come, it doesn't fit with Hasbara. Hasbara is a long-standing policy of crude propaganda intended to toe the official Israeli line. I'm asking, is Hilal a house of Hasbara? Hilal itself may not wish to self-incriminate, and after all, its mandate, like CIJA, is also clearly pro-Israeli. But this is where we have the right to ask our administration. What about the UBC administration? CTV has identified the soldier as a fourth-year UBC student. Did UBC grant any concessions to a student to join a foreign army engaged in, many have actually been calling genocidal war? And will UBC guarantee that this soldier, or active or non-active at the point, will not commit any acts of post-battle violence against fellow students if he's now on campus? Is UBC aware that students at Columbia have reported recently being sprayed, that was last Friday, on their campus during a rally by a chemical substance by assailants that they believe are tied to the Israeli army? As for the sticker incident, why hasn't UBC disclosed or demanded the disclosure of the name of Hilal's contractor? We keep asking this question, but instead we get these lengthy emails about policies of complaints, how you want to complain. Is that not part of UBC's duty of care towards its students? The removal of a tarp by students warrants calling in the RCMP, but links to fraudulent and malicious stickers that may constitute criminal defamation do not? This brings us to an important point for us to think about as we move forward. What is the relationship of UBC to Hilal BC? And I have serious questions here. And many of us are asking these questions because we are frustrated with the UBC's lack of action. First, is Hilal a private entity? And if so, why is it granted such authority on campus? Or is Hilal bound by UBC regulations? And if so, why hasn't it been held accountable? This or that. Or does Hilal enjoy the privilege of a de facto dual status, simultaneously off and on campus, which, if you ask me, is a perfect formula for impunity? So even more recently, there was denial of entry of some students, which we wouldn't do here, under the, at least what I saw on social media, under the pretext of this is a private event. So you're active on campus, but then you're private. You have, we say in Arabic, some people with oil, some people with like lard. Some, that may be bad translation, but that's what it is. So here is what we know for a fact. Fact one, according to Canadian Jewish News, Hilal BC inaugurated the construction of a $7 million new center on campus in 2009. This was made possible by UBC's agreement to extend Hilal's lease, any guess until when? All the way until 2084. What? This is according to the Canadian Jewish News. I'm quoting them. So they are on UBC property and they have a 73-year concession. Any student groups has that? Fact two, after October 7, Hilal thanked UBC campus security and admin for, and I'm quoting, working closely with us to ensure the safety of our student community, unquote. What about SJC and other students? Does their safety matter? And I'm asking this because I want to ask, given that they're working closely with them, why did UBC fail to draw on this close relationship with Hillel to get the latter to disclose the contractor's name? Or is this cooperation a one-way street? Fact 3. Hillel representatives, as you can see as well, were granted an audience with the newly appointed UBC president, Benoit Antoine Baker. And he met with them on his first day on the job, according to these reports. Also, the president, according to the Jewish Federation of Greater Vancouver, has responded to their letter in a matter of days in November. Actually, I just, they've, according to the website, they've printed the letter as an email publicly, sent from the president. That's how, carefree they are. Meanwhile, we have to think before every email we send for not being accused of all sorts of things. So, the president actually, according to this letter that's published on the website, I'm quoting them, this is not me, it says that the president in the letter says, will discuss this issue with the deans. They're going to discuss the role of the classroom during political conflict and the importance of open, principled, and balanced debate. He's telling them as well that he will be working with the executive to determine the proper response to challenges across the spectrum of behavior during this conflict. This is all about a political conflict. So they can talk politics, but we can't. By contrast, the President's office has yet to respond to a letter sent in October and signed by over 1,000 faculty, staff, and students. We have yet to hear from them, but they are responding to these non-UBC entities before they even reply to us. So I want to get to the larger question of political interference in education, which is what we are actually facing in all of this. The high-profile access of pro-Israeli and Zionist groups to teaching governance is not restricted to UBC or Hillel BC. BC Cabinet Minister of Post-Secondary Education, which was mentioned before, Selina Robinson, I'm repeating what Brenna said, has been in daily conversation with CIJA. I also should point out that on November 5 in 2023, last November, and while speaking at a B'nai B'rith event, Robinson also said that CIJA is a partner when it comes to planning Holocaust education. On November 10, I don't think I have a slide on this one. On November 10, Michael Mostyn, the CEO of B'nai B'rith Canada, which I mentioned called for the expulsion of students, told CBC, and I'm quoting, teachers have to be very particular about how they present the material about the Holocaust to students who are growing up in a world of social media where anti-Semitic falsehoods are rampant, unquote. So my question is, what does being particular mean? Will it mean adopting the discredited era definition of anti-Semitism? B'nai B'rith, this is the same organization this person is the CEO of, has openly advocated for ERA and applauded its endorsement by Canadian legislatures. Last September, by the way, following the scandal of honoring a Ukrainian Nazi in Parliament, B'nai B'rith circulated a petition calling on the expedited release of government documents pertaining to the Holocaust. That is commendable. I don't think anyone here actually thinks that's not a good idea. We want to know, and if there are actually collaborators or anyone involved in Canada, I think they should be put to trial. But what did the B'nai B'rith do as well? In the same petition, they snuck in a provision calling for the adoption of ERA. That is reprehensible. They have no credibility if they insist on linking the two. So, examples for those of you who don't know of anti-Semitism cited by ERA definition contains language that is racist towards Palestinians. That's what we should call it. By depicting criticism of Israel as anti-Semitic. Many universities, by the way, including UCL in the UK and University of Toronto in Canada, have deemed ERA unfit for adoption. So my question is the following to Ms. Robinson. Will Canadian education, and to all Canadian education officials, will Canadian education officials listen to experts at public universities or lend their ears to Zionist lobby groups like B'nai B'rith and CIJA? Will Canadian school curricula be dictated by principles of progressive pedagogies that incorporate anti-racist education, including, of course, the education on the Holocaust, and one would hope as well histories of other genocides around the world? Or will these curricula be subject to political interference and framed in a manner that will demonize criticism of Israel and depict it as anti-Semitic for students in grade 7 and 8, so that they can eventually fail to understand and see the cause of Palestinian liberation? So I want to be clear as I wrap up. Sorry, I keep moving, it's a slow one. Let me be clear. Any mandated school education or updated university policy that refers to Israel necessarily involves Palestine. You cannot speak about Israel and tell us to basically cease to speak under the unfortunate weaponization of anti-Semitism. You want to detach the two, that's fine. But we decide, and we, I mean Palestinian people, peoples of Arab background, peoples are suffering, what anti-Palestinian racism is. If you want to speak about Israel, you're automatically involving them, so that you cannot actually silence them in that respect. So, will Ottawa, BC, and UBC governments publicly commit to guaranteeing that anti-Palestinian racism is also institutionalized in educational material that make reference to Israel? This is the heart of the matter we're facing today. The Orwellian prohibition and silencing of pro-Palestine speech under false pretenses of violation of hate speech. I'll say that one more time. This is the heart of the matter, the Orwellian prohibition and silencing of pro-Palestinian speech under false pretenses of violations of hate speech. So long as Sija, Benaya Brith, and Hillel self-identify with Israel, they cannot pretend that their lobbying is not a form of foreign political interference. And so long as they are as such, they must be subject to questioning. No Hasbara tactics will change that, or intimidate us, or make us change our mind about speaking on this issue. If these organizations are genuine about fighting hate speech, they should stop weaponizing anti-Semitism to bully, intimidate, harass, and threaten the physical safety, mental well-being, and professional future of students who are speaking out about Palestine. As conscientious educators, we have a duty to oppose this interference and to defend and support students who are subject to it. Scholars United will never be silenced. While we push back against this crackdown, we must not forget, as many of my colleagues have reiterated, our primary duty, because this is a way sometimes of shifting the debate from the real issue here. And it's so outrageous that it's happening at a moment when we are witnessing a genocide in Gaza. We must not forget that our primary duty during this tragic moment is to keep pressing for justice in Palestine. What we are facing at our universities, as serious as it is, pales in comparison to the all-out war on education and the people of Palestine in general that Israel is conducting in Gaza and the rest of historic Palestine. This has amounted to what has been referred to as scholasticide, the physical elimination of Palestinian scholars and teachers, including, I'm just naming a couple for recognition here, Professor Abdel Nasser As-Saqqa, and President of the University, he's geographer, and President of the University College of Applied Sciences, Dr. Saeed Al-Zubda, along with his wife and children, who was killed during bombings. So, scholasticide, there's a scholasticide, the killing of scholars, and scholasticide, the destruction of the infrastructure of education system. Israel's genocidal war is also doing that. Hundreds of thousands of children who have been spared the tragic fate of many thousands killed under Israeli bombardment are living today in destitute conditions in Gaza, let alone deprived of education. Many of these children, by the way, are featured a lot in Arab media. Against all odds, I listen to them every day, every other day, yearning to return to class and to their schoolmates and to their playgrounds, even if Israel is not leaving any standing, including UN schools, which are being bombed while these children are there not for education, they're there as refugees. So even schools as a space of refuge is denied, not simply as a space of education. So I would say that although their stories are not being told, we must tell their stories. The best response to prohibiting Palestine is promoting Palestine. We will never forget, we will never stop sharing. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Please remember that we've asked people not to record. Please do not record, or we'll have to ask you to leave. Okay? Thank you. Our next speaker is Professor Crystal Webster.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm wrapping everything up by sharing the list of demands that come from the Faculty for Palestine group. We call on the Faculty Association to defend faculty and reaffirm academic freedom in relation to Palestine. We have spoken tonight about the various ways in which the administration has repressed and intimidated faculty who, acting either in their capacities as experts or as people of conscience, have sought to shed light on the catastrophic terror unleashed upon the people of Gaza. Other major labor unions in Canada, including the Canadian Federation of Nurses Union, the Ontario Federation of Labor, as well as Unifor, Canada's largest private sector union, and an impressive roster of unions in the United States, including the UAW, the Chicago Teachers Union, and the American Postal Workers Union, have all issued robust statements in solidarity with Palestine and Palestinians. We are disappointed that our UBC Faculty Association has not chosen to take up the frankly privileged position to act in solidarity with Palestinian people and against the brutality of settler colonial genocide. But even in the absence of this more courageous stand, we demand the bare minimum that our union ought to be able to provide, an assurance of our rights and the comfort of its protections. The wave of intimidation, chill, and threat suffered by our faculty and our campus community since the slaughter in Gaza began, and the atmosphere of censorship that has been imposed, contravene the university's stated investments in anti-racist and decolonization efforts, and imperil the very nature and mission of higher education. We call on the Faculty Association to be a model of strength and clarity in the face of this intimidation and other such alarming encroachments on our academic freedom, to make a robust, clear-sighted defense of our rights, and to reject the rising censorship of critical and engaged voices. The time is already grievously late for the Faculty Association to take up this responsibility and issue a specific affirmation of our right to teach about and discuss the history and present of Palestine, and to affirm that solidarity with Palestine constitutes protected speech. But it is necessary that they do so now. In the face of the administration's arbitrary enforcements of power, sudden changes to usual operating protocols, and conciliatory cowardice in the face of intimidation by powerful lobbying groups, we demand that the Faculty Association defend its constituent members and make a full-throated defense of our academic freedom to speak on the actual facts of history, our present, and to discuss, teach about, and advocate for Palestinian people. Until our Faculty Association steps up and joins us in solidarity and in strength, we are here to say we have the right to speak on Palestine. We have the right to give voice to our conscience, and we have the right to advocate collectively for the freedom and liberation of Palestinian people from ongoing settler colonial oppression and mass murder in a genocidal campaign. We demand that UBC administration explicitly commit to opposing anti-Palestinian racism and commit to the protection of its students. We have spoken tonight about the myriad ways in which the university administration has brought its disciplinary weight to bear upon our students, either through the imposition of bureaucratic labyrinths or indeed through unleashing the RCMP and campus security on Arab and Palestinian students, particularly upon women of color convening in peaceful ways at campus events. We've spoken about harassment, doxing, and endangering of our students by a contractor working for the Hillel organization on campus through a racist and pernicious sticker campaign that has directly and knowingly put our students at the Social Justice Center in crosshairs of retaliatory right-wing violence by intentionally defaming and targeting them. These events have contributed to immense trauma, anxiety, and the concrete need for material forms of support. And yet there have been months of utter silence by the administration about what amounts to the terrorization of our students by this organization and its paid contractor. In the wake of such acts, there should be extra care, attention, and provisions put in place to protect our students, and instead, there has been a never-ending series of consistent efforts to block student and faculty organizing and collective space holding by not approving room bookings for events that concern Palestine, by covering expressions of solidarity on campus, by removing posters advertising events and spaces for collective healing and grief sharing. We demand that the administration explicitly commit to supporting our Muslim, Arab, and Palestinian students and allies, and to opposing anti-Palestinian racism by 1, a transparent disclosure of the name of the third party at Hillel, and that they hold them accountable, and 2, ending the harassment and intimidation of Arab, Muslim, and Palestinian students led by Campus Security, RCMP, and the university. The university should provide equal care and protection to all its students, and to students, what the administration will not say to you, we say, we see you, we hear you, and we stand with you in solidarity and in struggle. We demand that the university lift what is effectively a ban on political statements. In the past, the UBC President's Office has made a strong political statement, various, in support of many causes. No such support has come from the President's Office for our students, faculty, and staff who are suffering fear and trauma for family and loved ones in Palestine. In fact, on October 11th, the UBC interim president made a statement recognizing, quote, the atrocities from terrorist attacks in Israel, while being symptomatically silent regarding the ongoing state of terror committed by Israel against Palestinians. In the October 11th statement, the UBC President's Office made no reference to Palestine or Palestinians, instead choosing to refer to, quote, Israel, Gaza, and elsewhere. The erasure of Palestine as a geography, Palestinians as a people, and their plight as a nation dehumanizes Palestinians and runs directly contrary to the claim that UBC is committed to, quote, providing a safe, inclusive environment with a shared value of peaceful relations. UBC's declared support for decolonization and practices of equity, diversity, and inclusion rings hollow in light of this partisan approach. And the administration's silence over Palestine has only deepened since the October 11th statement, an unconscionable silence given that we have now witnessed over 100 days of a genocidal campaign that has a daily death rate, according to the British charity Oxfam, that has, quote, surpassed any other major conflict in the 21st century. Furthermore, as we have discussed tonight, our administration has effectively banned statements of support for Palestinians as, quote, political. To make a policy that defies what had previously been the norm, one that was practiced even by the President's office, is blatantly discriminatory. Policies should be applied equally to all groups and conflicts. We reject any and all forms of discrimination and demand that the university lift this policy, those communicated by email, as well as those communicated behind closed doors to heads and chairs. This policy, which prohibits free speech on Palestine and the freedom to advocate for the rights of Palestinian people. Lastly, we demand that our university condemn the scholasticide in Palestine. On January 21st, an article in the Toronto Star lays out explicitly what is happening in Palestine as regards to education. Israel, argued the Star, is conducting a scholasticide. In destroying Gaza's entire higher educational infrastructure, in its assaults on university as well as in the West Bank, in the murder of academics, teachers, scholars, and educational workers, and in the serious harassment and attacks on senior faculty and students supporting Palestine within the Israeli university system, Israel is committing a scholasticide. As of January 21st, in addition to killing countless scholars, teachers, and educational workers, Israel has destroyed every single university, more than 350 schools, and public libraries in Gaza. So these are our demands of UBC. We await the administration's response, and we will now hear about steps we can all take moving forward. Thank you.